We're now up to our final speaker who will provide an industry perspective on future operating environment. Please welcome Mr. Hugh Webster from Boeing Australia.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, First Nations peoples, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the wider Boeing team and indeed entire industry, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon about industry's perspectives on the future operating environment. This story begins in an office building in a city centre behind a SCEC-endorsed door where a team of analysts have spent most of January and February poring over defence strategic guidance. They've been looking at open source reports and soaking up classified intelligence reports. The group were methodically building a picture of regional politics, economic forecasts, social environmental issues, and future technology trends in the Asia and Southeast Asia region out to 2030. They've looked at the implications for the ADF. What are the threats? What are the capability and readiness levels that defence needs? But they weren't ADF personnel. They weren't defence civilians. They were a team of Boeing former operators, engineers, and strategists who were tasked with figuring out what does the ADF really need in the coming years so that we can make the right business decisions relating to innovation, investment, and our workforce. So the million-dollar question, what did they find? Like a lot of strategic intelligence reports, the conclusions were pretty sobering. Our assessment was that the capability gap between what Western defence forces need and what you have or are going to get is large. Integration and interoperability across the joint force is desperately needed but slowly being delivered. The cost to sustain increasingly more complex weapon systems is steadily growing. The pace of acquisition process reform is never going to solve that capability gap because its fundamental design addresses internal process contests rather than warfighter capability contests. These latter contests will fall to those forces who are best equipped and trained for the conflict at hand. Military advantage will depend not just on the training of military personnel, but on how quickly defence industry can develop, deliver, and sustain capability for defence in time of dynamic need. Industry is concerned that without philosophical and actual reform and then acceleration, our forces will not be adequately able to deal with the threats in the coming decade. This is not just an Australian situation. The US DoD's annual Industrial Capabilities Report stated that, quote, "Our defence industrial base has reached an inflection point in its history regarding the balance between its vulnerabilities and its opportunities for modernisation and reform." Our situation is structural. There's been a steady decline in defence industrial capability, facilitated and encouraged on industry's side by free market forces that value shareholder outcomes and reward behaviours like outsourcing and offshoring. On defence's side, value for money evaluations that favour lowest cost for acceptable capability discourage capital and technology investment. And the entire machinery is sustained by an ageing and a shrinking workforce. This can't just be solved with more money or a little bit of Australian ingenuity where we cobble together something novel using chicken wire and fence posts. It's going to require a large-scale industry and defence rethink, innovating not just what we acquire, but also innovating how we acquire it. Our combined challenge is to create and sustain a defence industry-based advantage that is enduringly innovative, leverages the breadth and diversity of Australian and international expertise, and continually delivers real sustained capability outcomes for the warfighter. But this is not just about who can best deliver the next generation of aircraft, ships and tanks. We also need to adapt emerging technologies from the commercial sector and merge them into military use on top of our legacy platforms. There's a long list of exciting technical things that I'd like to bring into the hands of the warfighters. Things like AI, biotechnology, autonomous systems, non-kinetic weapons, robust C2 and comms, hypersonics, quantum products, and the Internet of Military Things. The really interesting thing about that list is that they're revolutionising commercial markets in addition to defence, and unarguably are being invested in by non-defence companies in orders of magnitude greater than defence R&D planners could even plan. However, if we just cherry-pick individual bits of attractive technologies and we try and shoehorn them into stovepipe defence programs, we're going to relearn the very lesson that the Pentagon learnt with its third offset strategy. Without systemic rethinking of the relationship between defence and this new industry base, the operational benefits of all of this new tech will be minimal and the road to get there will be hard. Issues to be explored include how do we field, scale and sustain these new technologies into defence at a much, much faster pace? Does the rapid evolution of technology give us an opportunity to rethink what life of type means? And whether attritable platforms with skinnier support systems are more effective investments because we plan to replace them anyway? Do we need new defence or government organisations, not just to create policy for innovation and industrialisation, but to actually together achieve those outcomes? Of course, modernisation and technology revolution on top of Defence's existing recapitalisation plans will all have impacts on the defence budget bottom line. And if we move from a traditional sustainment mentality to something that includes these continual capability uplifts, or evergreening, as Navy calls them, budget pressures will only increase. But there is an upside though. There is strategic value in signalling to our adversaries and to our defence industry that we're going to back our talk about technical superiority, innovation and defence resilience with real money. Such a clear plan, backed by a detailed roadmap tying together Defence's vision for these technologies, such as AI, autonomous systems and the Internet of Military Things, provides the clarity to industry of intent and stimulates innovation investment. Take, for example, the Australian Space Agency, who recently published capability roadmaps for 7 national civil space priority areas, cross-cutting technology areas that support those, and then backed those with new investments. I mentioned at the outset that a vital plank is innovating not just what we acquire, but innovating how we acquire it. Capability acquisition processes tend to favour a top-down, requirements-driven approach, but this leaves little room for innovation. Large, formal contracts with highly prescriptive plans, processes, specifications and penalties leave no space to innovate, particularly if there is a chance of failure of the technology. Avenues for companies to offer new ideas and technologies are small and tend to focus on off-the-shelf existing things. Innovative capability development requires adaptable, affordable and agile processes. Defence needs to take a hard look at the capability lifecycle and acquisition machinery, where we're often seeing risk-conservative, linear, probity-driven processes, ultimately to Defence's overall detriment. If we were to use our generational language, it's like we're trying to acquire and innovate a 5th-gen force using, at best, 3rd-gen processes. If you're buying information age tech such as software or doing complex systems integration, then you need to use modern best practice acquisition and development systems. So what does this mean? This means driving agile practices not only into our acquisition systems and our contracts, but into our program cultures. We need to embrace things that commercial software development companies do, and as a result, fundamentally reform the belt and braces nature of our defence contracts. We need to develop and allow novel execution and program strategies. We as industry need to come to grips that everything is not going to be procured through some big programs of record. Sometimes programs are going to be a series of many, many small projects that incrementally deliver capability to the warfighter much, much faster. The acquisition of space domain awareness systems is a good example of how this might play out. In an early tranche, Defence is selecting up to 3 data-as-a-service providers where Defence actually owns no infrastructure, while lower TRL level tech is given an opportunity to mature in later tranches. We need to encourage these flexible and innovative approaches. There needs to be increased collaboration between our scientists, our acquirers, our operators and industry professionals. There needs to be greater industry engagement during early requirements and capability phases. And by that I mean in operational and technical workshops, and not just with our MSPs and our above-the-line contractors. There is a model that is already bearing fruit for defence. The Force Design team have leant forward and is successfully engaging with 4 different, ordinarily competing prime OEMs. They're conducting workshops where the engineers are sitting side by side in the same conference room, helping to collaboratively build Defence's IAMD system of systems. So it can be done. Innovation also means looking at how we develop our capabilities. We need to do more prototyping, then experimenting, then fielding, then using, and then take that process, rinse and repeat. We need to do more force-level integration in labs prior to operations. Several of the prime companies have integration labs here in Australia, and many SMEs have great capabilities. We need Defence to bring these together and do some risk-retiring integration work. Defence will need to solve some heady US export issues, and industry will need to work hard to resolve intellectual property concerns. The overall size and composition of defence industry also offers some insights into other innovation challenges. Industry can be characterised as bimodal, with a large number of smaller SMEs and primes, but very few mid-sized companies. Across the Western world, there's been a long-term decline in the capacity of the industry base. So what structural things do we need to do to restore that? And what role does innovation play in that? How do we broaden the industrial base to incorporate those non-traditional partners who are developing commercial tech that is quite novel, without throwing away the valued defence industry expertise to deal with unique things like military airworthiness and security? Security in particular is a large challenge for defence industry. Faced with increasing security on defence networks, attackers are turning to industry networks instead. Just like defence, we face sustained and increasing cyber threats. Threats related to intellectual property, espionage and hacking are a daily challenge for our IT teams. The challenge is to ensure that industry is resilient, that defence weapon systems are secure, without adding a whole lot of new cybersecurity requirements that drive compliance costs spiralling upwards, or that stifle that very innovation that defence is going to depend on in the future. A future industry base that includes these non-traditional partners is an exciting future, not only because of the technology that defence can leverage, but the diversity of the workforce that then becomes available. This, however, is a double-edged sword, since the wage base, cultural expectations and security clearance readiness of these people will be a challenge. But if we can solve those things and bring the smarts from a Silicon Valley campus into an OEM prime like mine, then defence has the opportunity to gain the benefit of that 6th-gen thinking, and we have the opportunity to solve some of those structural ageing STEM problems. All of this needs to happen within a reimagined innovation ecosystem. Sometimes we apply a lens that innovation is just about R&D, and it's only something that DST Group or CSIRO or a handful of small SMEs do. I'd argue that the innovation ecosystem needs to be thought of as much, much broader than that. Yes, research and prototyping needs to be done, but we also need to solve the effective transition of that capability into service, and that means agile software development at scale and large-scale military equipment manufacturing, and then in service support and possibly even export. This is an industry-wide endeavour that needs a range of organisations to build resilient, innovative, sovereign capability. The keys to success are tight collaboration. This means teaming and partnerships and joint programs with defence, operators, acquirers and engineers working side by side. For example, our air power teaming system brings together diverse companies with strengths across the value chain. And then we work as one with the Commonwealth team to design, to manufacture and to flight test. In this sense, the Loyal Wingman itself is delivered with a team of defence and industry wingmen. Thinking more broadly to the whole defence industry ecosystem, what does that collaborative thing look like at scale? Are there new organisations that are required to facilitate primes, SMEs and defence researchers to drive technology into service as quickly as possible? What is the balance of public and private funding that will make this succeed? And how do sustainment companies who are aiming to evergreen a defence weapon system reach back into that innovation value chain? To conclude, building innovation and resilience in defence industry for the future operating environment is a demanding challenge. And even with a small number of factors that I've outlined here, a multifaceted approach is required. We need to transform our current capability lifecycle systems so that they have an innovation and an agility focus. We need to modernise acquisition processes. We need to find new ways to organise, fund and drive private sector innovation so that tangible warfighting outcomes are delivered quickly. We need to knock down barriers that stifle industry collaboration between allies and international partners. And above all, we need to remember that while our organisations are sometimes wont to conduct endless reviews and generate mountains of PowerPoint charts, our adversaries are busy building warfighting capability. The time to innovate is now. Thank you.